recently, the 15th anniversary of The Namesake came up, the film. And for me, I think the film and the book were really important, especially the soundtrack. Shout out Nitin Swahini. I'm sure, everyone listening knows the stuff that Nitin has done, so I'm sure I don't have to mention it. But for the film itself, the soundtrack I think is really beautiful because it brings in a lot of the classical elements as well as a lot of Western fusion and stuff like that. So yeah, if you've not seen the film or if you've not heard the soundtrack, it's time you do because it's really great. But so I recently watched it, and I was thinking a lot about things which we'll talk later in the show about as well. Representation and connection to culture, especially in Gogol's eyes. And Gogol is the main character within the film. So that representation that he saw with his mother, his father, and his sister, and these different sort of relationships he had. I really think the film stands out to me because here I am, a person from the United States who's just moved to London, who's trying to rebuild connections with his family back home, and he's also rebuilding connections with the people here. So yeah, I think there's something really beautiful with The Namesake, and I actually got to see Jhumpa Lahiri, who is the writer of the book, actually read some stuff from it when I was in New Jersey randomly. She lives a town away from my parents.
Wow.
And she was just at a Barnes and Nobles doing a reading.
Jhumpa Lahiri was just about.
She was just about,
That's
shopping.
so cool.
And she was just sure, I'm going to just read some words from here. But that's my pick, The Namesake. So if this is the first time you're hearing about it, please do look it up. I'm sure you can stream it, and do check out the soundtrack as well.
Amazing, thank you. And then Mixtress, what are you reading and watching at the moment?
So I'm a bit of a I kind of just watch a lot of arty farty films generally, but one of the ones that I've watched recently was the first film by Sham Benegal. I feel like I'm butchering that, and I shouldn't because he's Bengali, and I'm Bengali. But it's a film about this middle class man, and how this kind of very gentle but quite, I don't know, discomforting story about class structure and caste in India, and his love story with this woman. And I found out about it after I watched this film Sir, which is on Netflix, and which was also about the caste system. And as someone who definitely benefited from all the complex structures of oppression in colorism and from the caste structure as being a Mukherjee and stuff, it's very important to look into it because I'm FOB, and a lot of the treatment I had was very different to a lot of treatment that other people had. And the film is actually just quite incredible. It's very modern in how it's filmed and set up, for not just it's from India, but 1974. And I've watched a lot of Sholay and stuff like that from Nana films from back then, quite dramatic, and there was a lot of bursting into song and dance, and that's awesome. But
this is realistic, almost
it was realistic,
Bengali neorealism.
It was.
I watched some of the making of, which is weird that it's documented.
Yeah, I think those films are called parallel cinemas.
Yeah.
And they're based on French New Wave, but it's the South Asian, Indian, Bengali, Pakistani attempt at it.
Yeah, and this is it's a type of film that me recommending it, my mom would call, Bengali word of the day, atil, which is the word pseudo-intellectual in Bengali. But I really enjoyed it. It was very gentle but very thought-provoking. And the film Sir as well, I didn't mention that on the thing, but it's really good as well.
Yeah, Sir is a really good one too.
Have you ever read Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things?
I actually got sent that in the post by my dear mother, Papu Mukherjee, 3 days ago.
Yeah,
so I
that
still
was
have to
my starting point of
Yeah.
caste and understanding caste systems and what they meant. Because before that, I didn't know.
Yeah, it's really hard to know when you're like from this generation as well. Even if you're in India, like you're just kind of like bopping about, and then you realize it's because we're like a product of our privilege, right? Like, yeah.
Also, there's a big stigma around like serious films versus like Bollywood movies.
Oh yeah.
Because I know even like when I put Bollywood movies on, my parents don't want to watch anything serious. They just want to see like Shah Rukh Khan like dancing on a mountaintop.
In Switzerland.
In Switzerland. But there's actually one more film I think that you would like. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's called Party. It's from like the 80s, and it's a really good film that talks about like class structures and like male and female roles. Yeah, so that's definitely give that one a check out too.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you for the recommendation.
I would say my reading and watching, well, I guess what I've been kind of like being a part of, I guess it's a dialed in conversation I had the other day, but I've been absorbing a lot of our own history of like music in the UK and the role that women particularly played in the UK's music industry, but almost have been, I would say to some extent, written out of the history, because I spoke to Sweetie Kapoor and DJ Ritu, and also Provat from Daytimers, who founded Daytimers. But the conversation kind of focused around the fact that, you know, you mentioned Nitin Sawhney earlier and Talvin Singh and all these incredible artists who rose to acclaim, but ultimately, like, behind all of them were these incredible women who were catalysts in their careers. But I didn't see, and I found it really difficult to kind of study for this or prepare for this and research for this conversation, because there was no history about them.
Yeah.
I didn't know the labels they had co-founded. I didn't know when I read about them in the past, it was really hard to find images of them. You know, the archive it isn't there, and so we're trying to somewhat change that and shake that up with the people that are still around now, and differentiate between what Daytimers and Bhangra music is, as opposed to the fact that there was a whole other scene that was the Asian underground. And then kind of like steer and try and have a open dialogue of how those communities can learn from each other today.
Cool.
I mean, that perfectly segues into the tweet of the month that we have picked this time. Amada picked an amazing thread from the one and only Queen herself, Ravina, and it's talking all about representation. And you said it really spoke to you. So I want to hear why, how, and talk me through it.
Yeah, so I think this tweet was maybe a few weeks ago, and I've just kind of been thinking about it since that. And it just so happened that when we were thinking about this show and we had Mixtress coming on, and, you know, we were just kind of crafting the idea, I thought it would be a perfect discussion to have. So basically, what I'm thinking is, how can South Asians represent, of course with the Z, our culture, but in a way that feels authentic to us? It's a bit spicy, but I think let's get into it. So Ravina's tweet basically was her talking about how, as a South Asian woman, she's trying to break barriers through art in her own way. And for those who don't know, Ravina just dropped Asha's Awakening, which is this beautiful pop album where she's actually conceptualized Asha, this alien or extraterrestrial that has landed on a planet and, you know, is telling a story through song and dance. And this is a bit different from what Ravina usually does. So, you know, it's the first time in a minute where she's actually fully embracing the South Asian culture. We actually got to see a bit of that when we did our Farmer Stream protest.
Yes,
and we had that beautiful performance by Ravina, which was, you know, we were really blessed to have that, because that was the first time where Ravina, you know, not only did she sing the Punjabi hymn, Rishabh, she actually sang a Bollywood song really beautifully, acoustically. But yeah, so this tweet just goes on to talk about how Ravina, as a South Asian artist, you know, now that she's sort of broken into the mainstream, and I've known Ravina since she's been more or less independent. Like, she's still independent now, but she's catapulted into this like stratosphere of like amazingness. She's just really contemplating, you know, why when she's embracing her culture and doing the things that she's doing, she still gets a lot of pushback. and why people are still sort of saying, you know, are not really noticing what she's doing when her contemporaries who are non-South Asian and are taking, you know, instruments, sounds, visuals, being inspired by South Asia are getting, you know, more of a spotlight and are getting written about. But yeah, I'd love to hear, you know, everyone's thought on this.
Okay, well, the first thing that came to mind from this was, of course, the farmers' protests live stream, which was incredible, and how that really spoke to me at a time where I felt really lonely and felt like there was no South Asian people around me in music to look up to or to appreciate. And then more than that, that I've never felt more cool than this moment of seeing that live stream. I remember sitting there and being like, wow, there's a bunch of us who are just doing mad stuff all the time. And so often we do see, especially in that era, the H&M tops with Ganesh plastered all over it. People were rocking them like it was their job. And I was like, right.
Those are coming back. I saw some of those in
Don't
Camden.
trigger me.
In Camden, I
Someone with a tote on the way
I
here.
saw some guy wearing.
I saw a Lauren with a tote, and it had Saraswati on it, and I swear to God, I'm not religious, but I was like, I saw my mom's discerning face in the background. She was like, I don't do puja for this. Like,
Yeah.
doesn't do puja for a 1 quid tote.
No, she really doesn't. She doesn't. And it's just mad because everyone is rocking them as if it's the coolest banty in the world, and it's our whole culture.
Right.
And in the meantime, you know, I'm getting bullied when we were studying like Hinduism in RE back in school, and people were mimicking, like, singing, you know, all the bhajans and everything. People were laughing and like pointing at me, oh, you smell like curry, bruv. Like, what the hell? So, you know, finally seeing all of that come together, I think what this tweet and this thread doesn't just speak to maybe the music industry, but so far beyond that, and such a shared experience that many of us have had if we've grown up in areas that aren't particularly, you know, South Asian. So yeah, it struck a chord, and it's sad to see someone who we all admire so much still face the same glass ceiling that we tend to do.
Yeah, what is actually the tweet? Because did we read it out, like the MIA part?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure, yeah, we can read it out loud. So, now that I have experience being a South Asian woman trying to break barriers through art in my own way, I'm understanding why MIA was so at war with the system all the time. The music industry as an unforgiving and isolating place for South Asian musicians, and she did that in 2005. And she just goes on to say, they don't give us any opportunities to shine despite South Asian art and spirituality being everywhere. And if we do make our way in, they want us to erase our sounds, features, language, culture, and experiences as much as we can to have any chance at surviving the opportunity.
Yeah, it's hard because you don't necessarily just want to use your, you know, ethnicity or nationality to get you where you are. And if people are also like suppressing that, that's also problematic. It's your choice in how you express and want to kind of develop your sound, your look, and your agency, essentially. But yeah, no, that tweet definitely evokes a lot of feelings and thoughts of like how the music industry needs to pattern up.
You tell him, Samuel.
Yeah, I think like on both flip sides, I can say from my experience, like on one end, like it just feels like quite a constant uphill battle with like being a 24-year-old queer jungle DJ in a scene of like people who like, you know, oh, vinyl only, and like I'm Gary, I'm 54 from Shropshire, like I have that on one end, and then on the other end I'm like, what is brown? I was actually having a chat with Toby from Tamari Records, who I bumped into just randomly today, funnily enough, and he was like, he's Guyanese, and he was like, yeah, sometimes like I just you know, you get the existential crisis, like am I black enough, am I brown enough, like what is this identity? And like we had a chat for 25 minutes, and our conclusion was no, we're all confused, like we're all just really confused, and like identity is like this lifelong journey we go on. And like
totally.
and like, you know, I had I'm not gonna lie, guys, like I'm gonna be really, really honest here and a bit you know, it might be a bit awkward, but like I had an existential crisis last year about like my brown identity, where I was like, am I not brown because I am not wearing my Indian garbs to a jungle gig? Like what are these connections?
No.
Yeah.
But like what are these connections? Like, am I like less brown because I'm covered in tattoos? Like, am I like? But these are questions I was like genuinely asking myself for no fault of anyone's, but like just going into like the culture vulture nature of white journalists or
Yes.
magazines painting this idea of brown being this one look, and I was like, this is doing exactly what Mossy G did to us, like all of our aunties did to us. They were like, oh well, you should look like this and you should dress like this and this is how you should lead your life, particularly for women. And it's like, actually, like we need to like break those barriers. And I get what Ravina's saying here in terms of like we're not a monolith. We're not like a look or an aesthetic or a trend. Like, it's like no group of people is, and we can't accept that as people.
Yeah.
That we need to have a certain look or be a
Yeah.
certain way.
I think that's you've hit the nail on the head of like feeling like the press just want you for like Heritage Months and like what
Yeah.
you know
For the aesthetics.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, can
Yeah.
we rewrite that? Why can't you? Surely it makes sense for those press pieces and journalists to be like, we're going to write a different article and give people what they don't think they need. And it's actually quite refreshing to see, you know, when you've got an artist doing I don't know if it's a South Asian person or, you know, a Tamil person who's like Priya Raghu, you know, getting press pieces or being on the front of like a fashion outlet. You're kind of like, well, you know, wearing high heels or wearing, I don't know, like trainers. It doesn't matter what the brand advertisement is. It's just that she's there, you know, and it doesn't have to
They're
necessarily.
there.
Yeah.
They're round and they're proud of it. And
Yeah.
that's what matters. Like,
and that's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's enough. Exactly.